topic to bring again onto this podcast around our female bodies, intimacy, and everything to do with our pelvic region. And we'll also go into vaginismus. So I know that some of you, my dear listeners, know what it's like to live with this condition, and that is why I wanted to have Jess Seitz on the podcast. So she is an occupational therapist and the founder of Pain-Free Intimacy, where she works as a vaginismus recovery coach to help women from around the world break free of the pain and frustration of vaginismus to enjoy intimacy the way it was intended. So thank you so much for being here. Jess, I want you to tell us more about your journey and what led you to this work and how we can break free from, first, the fear of intimacy, the fear of our own bodies, and how to enjoy intimacy again, especially in the context of marriage. But yeah, thank you so much for being here, and tell us more about who you are, what led you to this work, and how you're feeling today.
Yeah, wow. Thank you for that, Joanna. That was a really great introduction. So yeah, my name is Jess, and I had vaginismus, which is probably the main thing that has led me here. But I, like many women out there, just struggled and felt alone in this journey. I was clueless. I felt so unsupported. I felt just disconnected from my body, from my husband in so many ways. And so that's kind of what led me to start Pain-Free Intimacy, because after struggling with this for 8 years and finally being able to break free from it, I realized there are so many women out there who are suffering in silence. And I wanted to change that. It wasn't right away. There was a period of about 4 years after healing before I finally felt ready to kind of come out and talk about this more. So yeah. I probably could have known I had vaginismus earlier on. Tampons were often a struggle. It's not for everyone, but for me, they were pretty painful. I had gone to the gynecologist ever since the age of 13 because I just had very long and miserable periods. The gynecology appointments and exams were also incredibly miserable. I remember, I think it was one of my first ones, I was being held down on the table by several staff members as the gynecologist is trying to do the internal exam, and I'm screaming, and it was, looking back, I'm like, that was not okay. And my mom would take me to get ice cream afterwards as a congratulations, but it didn't make up for it. So
absolutely not.
I've had some challenges since the beginning that have not been okay, but yeah, it really became an issue when I got married and tried to have sex for the first time. And I guess I kind of thought that the penis was going to be the hero to save all of this, to make everything better. I think a lot of women think this way, that once I get stretched out down there, we're gonna be rocking and rolling. Well, it didn't work like that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So wedding night, honeymoon was a struggle. And we went on our honeymoon to southern Turkey. And I remember, this was back in 2011, but I remember putting Skype credits on my phone to call my gynecologist from the Mediterranean, and was like, excuse me, how is this supposed to work? It's not working. And my gynecologist was like, you just need to relax. You need to drink wine, use more lube. Like, it's going to be okay. And I was like, okay. It was not okay. The theme continued, and it was just painful and miserable. And, of course, my sweet husband didn't want to push and create pain. So then we do other things, and then we try again. And it's like, I don't know what's going on. So that was the start of this. I guess it took me many gynecologist visits before, after finally about 4 years, I finally had a gynecologist mumble the word vaginismus. Which was like, oh, okay, I'm not crazy. There's a diagnosis here? Like, what? What did all this other gynecologists not tell me this? So from there, I kind of shuffled on over to pelvic floor therapy, and I spent the next 4 years in and out of pelvic floor therapy, doing all of the traditional exercises for this, dilators, breathing, relaxing. Once that didn't work, or quote unquote graduated from pelvic floor therapy. And they kind of, which basically means, sorry, there's nothing else we can do for you. I went over to see a sex therapist, and that was miserable. Got told all kinds of things like maybe we should watch porn together. Maybe you're not into your husband. Maybe you don't know how this works. I even one
Oh,
time they spent an hour trying to sit there and pull out my history of sexual abuse. And I thankfully don't have one. But after leaving that appointment, it was just like, what? Maybe I was. I'm calling my mom, like, Mom, was I sexually abused? What's wrong with me? And she's like, no, honey, not to my knowledge. So I saw all kinds of people, and it was basically just kind of like I just felt so confused, and I felt so alone, and I felt like there was no hope, because I wasn't this sexually abused case, but yeah, I was so quote unquote messed up that it seems like I should have had that, and I didn't. So then my body must be really messed up. And then pelvic floor therapy, I failed at over and over again, which is extra frustrating when you yourself are a therapist. And so it was just a mix
mhm.
of whole journey full of failure, isolation, feeling alone, bad answers, no answers sometimes. So anyway, that was kind of a long story. Well, a short story for the long journey that was. But yeah,
Yeah. Mm.
yeah,
Oh my goodness. I mean, that takes a lot of, first of all, it takes a lot of courage to share all of this. I mean, I'm sure that, like you said, it took a while for you to sort of allow yourself the courage to start talking about these things and then start helping women because I mean, I'm sure you felt the stigma around this topic and just the utter pressure and shame that women carry around this thing. Like it should be something that just works out on its own. Like that is the assumption. And or that if it doesn't, then there has to be some sexual trauma. And for many women there is. But it's not always the case. And I know from personal experience, like my journey has not included vaginismus per se, but it has included years of chronic pain in my upper body. And I know the frustration of going to all kinds of experts who are dismissive, who are like, some of them are like, what are you doing here? Or they just give advice that doesn't help or refer you to another expert in another field, and then they refer you to another expert, and you're just spending money and time trying to chase down this road of recovery, and that's not where the recovery is found until the correct answers are revealed to you. So I know the frustration, and it's awful. It's awful to be there. And for you, like, I'm curious because it took years. Like, as I understand it, you were married for a couple of years, and this was still just going on in the background and affecting your marriage. I'm sure. What was that like in terms of your, like, just your relationship with your husband? I'm sure, like, I understood your husband was very supportive and kind and all of those things and doesn't want to pressure you and is there to make sure that you're okay. But I'm sure that there was a lot of like emotional turmoil that, at least on your side, like, how is this going to go down? What's the future of my marriage and all of that? So, can you open up a little bit about that aspect?
it was incredibly difficult. And I don't think I was aware at the time about how much this was affecting just the various different aspects of our marriage. In the beginning, it was kind of like there's a lot of ambivalence, and okay, we'll just get past this and push through this, and it's our journey together. And that didn't last as long as I hope it could have. I will preface by saying my husband is the most incredible supportive husband in the world, and never ever did he
Mm-hmm.
push, never ever did he pressure. This was just like we both wanted this for our marriage. So in the beginning, there was a lot of, well, let's just keep going, let's just do it, and then eventually it'll get better. Just like anything in life, if you feel like if you just like
Yeah.
push past the pain or build up those muscles or stretch things out,
Mm-hmm.
and after several months of that, I just don't want this anymore. And so I just started shutting down I guess my body started shutting down my desire, my libido, my sex drive, whatever you want to call it, was dropping quickly, even like non-penetrative activities. I was just like, I don't want that. I couldn't vocalize why. I just knew, just, before marriage, it's like, oh, I want all these things. And after I started experiencing this, it just started that wall kind of went up physically and emotionally. And it just kind of kept going from there. And, everyone always loves to tell the woman who has vaginismus or pain with sex that you can do other things. And it's so true. There are so many things that we could do. And I do think that women who have vaginismus could write books about creative things that we could do besides penetrative sex. But at the end of the day, your body still has an aversion to intimacy because there has been such significant pain introduced to it and frustration. And so I always, tell my clients, if sex is painful, shameful, disappointing, frustrating, makes you feel like you're lacking, questioning your self-worth, all of these really hard things, of course your body is going to power down your desire, power down that sex drive. You're not gonna want that at a subconscious level. And so that's what started happening to me. I added a lot of questions in our marriage. I know, both of us kind of went through seasons of just basically depression, and we weren't able to connect easily over this despite really trying. And then really what got the worst was I just started getting angry at myself, angry at my body, angry at the situation. I felt like maybe I shouldn't have ever gotten married. I mean, faith is really important to me. And I just started questioning, like, God, why would you let me get married if this is what, if I can't have sex, like what? And so just started questioning a lot of things. And in that questioning, I became angry, and I started exuding anger towards my husband and just started pushing him away as a way to almost protect myself. Now I can say that now looking back at the situation, but in the midst of it all, there was just anger, there was hurt, and I didn't know where it stemmed from. And so now it's like, oh my gosh, they're at the core. So much of our intimate life really does kind of sit there and can be a foundation for a lot of other things. Intimacy is that deep, it's that connecting, it's that beautiful. And it also can be that hurtful. And often, I do think God designed intimacy to be the most vulnerable and the most connecting piece of a relationship. You are literally naked in front of another human being. That's such an exposing and vulnerable place. But that's why it's so beautiful, because in that vulnerability, you have deep connection. You have deep, coming together and deep intimacy. And it's so beautiful. You also have heightened emotions and feelings. Orgasms bring so much joy and goodness. And so everything's magnified in the bedroom, basically. Everything's magnified and intensified. And it's cool and it's awesome and it's beautiful. However, if there's pain or shame or anger or frustration in that zone, it's also magnified. And that's what I was experiencing, was this magnification of these not so great feelings and not so great emotions. And it really started affecting our marriage. I'm really grateful to be past this and to have healed from this. And now I can say the reverse is true, where it's so deep in connecting and we so value and cherish it. But it was hard for a journey. There's a lot of fear, there's a lot of anger, and there's a lot of just grieving in often ways I didn't know that I was experiencing.
Yeah, exactly. And I can definitely relate to the emotional aspect of that. And I think in my experience in my life, as well as the women that I talk to and my clients, it is, in any case, it doesn't have to be about vaginismus, but it is always our relationship with ourselves and our emotional, the subconscious, unconscious, emotional life that we have that affects how we then project it, what we're projecting onto or towards our spouse. And dissatisfaction with anything is something that, if we're frustrated with ourselves, this is something that comes up again and again. A woman is frustrated and angry with, there's anger, there's frustration, but in a relationship. And what is actually happening is that she's experiencing those things in herself, towards herself, without realizing it. So it doesn't have to be a specific case like vaginismus, but that's how it is. If we are dissatisfied with our own lives, the way we experience our daily experience, right? we start to project that. And if it affects our relationship, it affects our intimate relationship the most, because that's where it just all comes out without us realizing if we are in a safe relationship. And so that's just such an important key that you set that there was a lot of anger and turmoil, but you didn't understand where it was stemming from. And a lot of women can relate to this, and you can only in hindsight see where it was coming from, but the root is working, or the route that we have to go to is work with yourself, your deepest expressions, your deepest emotions, your deepest desires, and see, are those actually acknowledged? Is the pain actually acknowledged? Are we actually being honest with ourselves and with God, what we're actually experiencing and going through? And with me, I can relate to the intimacy part in marriage as well. Not even having vaginismus per se. What my experience was coming into marriage and not having sex beforehand, and wanting to save that because we saw that as a foundational principle that protects the marriage, and I still believe in it and see the biological, psychological reasons for that. And what I experienced was, because I was not connected to myself, I was not actually embodied. I was living in my head. I was living this hustle grind mode all the time. Super stressful. Like most of us were addicted to stress, cortisol, right? It's addictive. And not having any relationship with my pelvis, with my vagina, with my vulva, any of that, my womb. I didn't have a relationship with those. It wasn't conscious at all. It was just like, yeah, it's down there and it'll miraculously just, feel amazing for the rest of our lives when you're with your husband. And that's not how it goes. And so what ensued was a lot of like frustration around sex, frustration around desire, not feeling connection, not feeling like, oh, this is so great, like this is what they've been talking about, like this is the real deal. Like there was none of that. Sometimes, sure, and in the beginning, of course, perhaps for me personally, when it was new and exciting, there was just that element. But once that faded away, the reality of me not having a relationship with my pelvis started to kick in, and not me even being embodied or having a real connection with my husband. So I just wanted to highlight that these issues can be very common even if you don't have vaginismus per se. Vaginismus is like one step even further into the loophole of pain and not having a relationship with your entire body and being embodied. And so, yeah, the frustration is real. So how did you move past this phase into now enjoying intimacy? Like, what were the key pillars that created the change that you can share with us, that women can just start thinking about? How do I incorporate these things into my life? What is important?
I think you touched on a lot of that right there. There's definitely we're not in tune with our pelvis, our vaginas, our anatomy. And then oftentimes, so we have this disconnect, and this disconnect can happen for so many reasons.
Yeah.
It's different for everyone. I do primarily work with a lot of Christian women. So a lot of this does stem from just like not having a good awareness of our bodies. And that can come from things like purity culture, where we just don't have a good
Mm-hmm.
education. We've been shamed from our bodies. We're told not to think about it, explore, look, touch. And so many of my clients have never really even sat down, myself included, with a mirror and looked at, what do I look like? Because there's so much maybe
Yep.
shame or guilt associated with that. And that's a whole
Yes.
conversation. Some of my clients have experienced sexual abuse, and that, of course, if you have a history of sexual abuse or sexual trauma, that's going to cause a lot of dissociation that happens. Medical trauma, another thing. A lot of women have experienced either traumatic gynecological exams, traumatic like urinary tract infections, or things where they've had to have catheters placed, that can cause us to dissociate. Um, or it can just be like, you know, my whole life I've never really interacted with this area, and then all of a sudden I'm married and now I need to, and I'm not prepared and ready, and things just happen too fast and it results in pain, and now I have dissociation. So a lot of times it does come from this dissociation that you were kind of alluding to. The problem though that I kind of encountered is the traditional way we approach that is just by going to things like pelvic floor therapy or doing sex counseling, sex therapy, or psychotherapy. Both are good, but now we're still siloing and fragmenting this recovery. And this is what finally I realized. So after, again, 8 years of going through this, I'm an occupational therapist, and I was working with patients with like chronic pain, chronic conditions, using a biopsychosocial approach, which biopsychosocial approaches take biology, psychology, like the social aspects, and then I add in environmental and spiritual a lot of times to do more of a holistic approach to help my clients heal or just see progress in their symptoms and manage symptoms better. And a lot of this is that I love that the cortisol addiction, like working through some of that. But when I finally took, after 8 years and just not being in a good spot in our marriage and not really loving myself well, took a step back and was like, okay, I have tried, it seems like everything and nothing's working. Where I'm going to treat myself like I would one of my clients, like one of my patients back then. Where are the holes? And so came up with this whole did this analysis assessment of my life, looked at different models of what using sex as the occupation, because as occupational therapists, we are occupation based, so we don't necessarily treat from the dysfunction, we treat from the occupation. So we start with occupation, and then from there, we look at different domains. And so I looked at the occupation of sex for Jess's sex life, and then started breaking down domains and figuring out where are the holes, where are the inconsistencies. And that's when I was finally able to whoa, okay, I have been siloing this journey. I've gone to pelvic floor therapy, and we've done exercises and stretches and all of this stuff, and that's good, but I've only been working on the physiological aspect of vaginismus. And I realized vaginismus is way more than just my vagina. And then, I've gone to counseling, and that's worked a lot on the psychological aspect of this. And that's great. But then I've siloed it to really only working on the psychological aspect. And then it's just you keep doing all these things. And it was disconnected. Nothing was really working together. And it's this is not supporting my overall progress with vaginismus. So once I started kind of literally creating my own treatment plan, coming up with my own steps, goals, strategies, interventions, knuckled down and just got to it, that's when I finally was able to break free. So I would say doing a comprehensive, holistic, and I don't mean holistic like we're doing all kinds of medicinal herbs and all this stuff. I mean holistic like your whole body is getting attention, because vaginismus and sex and intimacy is not just your vagina. It's it's your whole being, mind, body, soul, and spirit. We've got to get everything moving and working together towards well-being and healing. So yeah, that's finally what helped me.
So important that you highlight the fact that we are you can't separate and just put parts of our lives into boxes or even parts of our bodies into these categories and boxes and be like, yeah, here's my sex life and here's my pelvis, and it's just separate from everything else. And it doesn't even have anything to do with it, my normal day-to-day life, me as a woman. It's just, yeah, when we're trying to have sex, then I'll think about it. And it doesn't work, because we are holistic beings. We are our minds, our bodies, our spirit, our soul, all of it is tied together. And so you can't really separate those things. And that is one of the biggest frustrations when you are engaging with traditional medicine or traditional medical system, because it feels like it is a system of boxing and categorizing conditions and syndromes, and it doesn't look at you as a whole being, right? And with this, I'd like to go into the purity culture aspect. It's been a topic on this podcast quite a few times, and many of my listeners totally feel the pressure, or have felt and have gone through Some have gone through extreme forms of control in that sense, and fear, especially like fear is that the main ingredient in a woman who is sort of still stuck there. And we both, like, it has come clear, it is clear, like we both respect some, certain spiritual, biological, psychological principles, and that has nothing still to do with purity culture, which takes and extracts our relationship with ourselves and with God and puts it in this formula of sometimes even abuse or fear manipulation, which distorts our relationship with God. And that is not great because it affects every area of our lives. So I want to hear from your perspective, like, what was your experience with purity culture and how did that affect everything? And how did you then start to move forward from that and create a new way of being and believing?
Yeah. So I'll start off by saying, like, I don't love purity culture, but I do understand the biblical principles of why this is important, and I do stand by that. However, we, as a society, as a culture, as the church, have unfortunately taken these principles and just kind of twisted them in a sense,
Mm-hmm.
and made them an end all be all, and that's where we have the problem. So I do definitely support the biblical principles for marriage and intimacy and how that's designed to be. But yes, okay, so I actually did not become a Christian until I was 18 years old. So most of my life growing up was, we were kind of went to church here or there, but it wasn't really anything very important to my family. So I didn't really grow up with a lot of this thinking. And then once I, became a Christian and started really living this life, I just jumped deep. I jumped right into it. It's like, okay, I have got to leave all of these things behind and jump
Mm-hmm.
strong into this. And so I embraced everything that I could.
Yeah.
And so, and then once I met my husband, we decided that we wanted to wait until marriage and valued that principle, thought that would be a really beneficial thing for our marriage and made the most sense, like you kind of said. So it was a value that we held tight to. And I don't regret that by any means. But I think what was the struggle was that I had, in that process, decided that my body was something that could lead others to stumble. And if I wore the wrong shirt or if I acted in a certain way with my body, it was going to be a problem for others. And so then that was kind of the first thing, was like, okay, cover myself up. My body is basically dirty and it's a tempting thing. And it's like this thing that I need to suppress and shame. And so that, I couldn't have said this again at the time. Like, all of this is looking back, it's like, oh my gosh, Jess, you believed a lot of this stuff. Um, in those beliefs, there was that subconscious, like, understanding that area is shameful. It's disgusting. It's not, it's, even though it's meant for this one person, it's something that can be this, like, tempting, I don't know, I'd often say like a seductive snake kind of thing. And then, so that's how you believe about your body. And then you get married and it's like, oh no, now it's great. And that shift just can't happen. That shift doesn't happen
No.
easily.
Yeah.
And so that was a huge part of this. The other part of this was, like, any type of understanding. I've said this, like, even looking at a mirror of my body, I just felt like I shouldn't be looking at this. I shouldn't be thinking about this. I shouldn't even, like,
Mm.
there's so much lack of education. I think because I went to occupational therapy school and we did cadaver lab and did anatomy, I was able to understand more about how the reproductive functioning works. But even that was just all from a medical perspective. Like, okay, here's a clitoris and this is what it serves and its function
Mm-hmm.
is. It's like, okay, I got function, anatomy, but it wasn't from an intimacy, identifying with that, believing that that was a good thing kind of perspective. Um, and then the last thing I think that was really impactful for me is I just really completely separated, like, sex and sexuality from God. And I know that's, a lot of people are like, oh, weird, Jess, don't talk about God and sex in the same sentence. But realizing that God designed my body to be sensual and sexual and to have it like that. And he said that was good.
Yes.
Like, that he designed the clitoris. And, like, women have this whole organ that's designed for our intimacy, our pleasure, and our just arousal, and it's so good. Whereas men have to share their arousal and like orgasm with their plumbing, and we have a whole organ dedicated to that. And God designed it that way, and He said it was good. And I had to believe that that was a good thing, and it's not this thing that's like, oh, it just happened to be that you can do this thing, and I don't want to hear about it, and it's, you know, you keep no. And no, that was how I was created to be. So once I started identifying and seeing myself as a sexual woman, and that I can embrace this and it's a good thing, instead of, you know, a secretive and shameful and this, you know, disrespectful kind of thing, but this is a good thing. And I had to do a lot of mindset shifts. And that's a lot of that happened as I was healing from vaginismus. So I hated that for 8 years. Sex was so painful, difficult, frustrating. But at the same time, the healing work I did in those 8 years, I healed from so much of this like purity culture kind of ideas and just wrong mindsets that I had, to where I grew to love my body, cherish my body, actually identify myself as a sexual being, a sexual woman. And then that has deepened my husband and my intimate relationship so much. So I can stand here thankful because I'm on the other side of it for sure. But and the healing that has happened is great. And so with my clients, we work through a lot of this, like these subconscious lies, fears, shame that's kind of bubbling and brewing there, so that we can have that freedom and we can have that new identity as women who are sexual. And that's okay. And that's actually really good. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And I want to echo what you just said there. I mean, I have come to the, like, I would have been in the past, I would have been so uncomfortable also to talk about God and sexuality in the same sentence. It would have been like, okay, let's not go there. It's a little uncomfortable, a little, you know, awkward. But I've come to the place where I've understood that, honestly, there's no problem there. There's absolutely no problem there. Like, the way God designed us. I mean, just when I'm learning more about the female body, especially now because I'm talking to women and we were talking about women, like how, you know, you mentioned clitoris, it's just like meant for pleasure, but then we also have like our vaginas have intense, like incredible capacity for pleasure when we start to map out and create a relationship with there and start to rewire our nervous system. My goodness, like our cervix is connected to the vagus nerve, and that is just like regulating the whole body and creating this whole body experience that goes beyond just the act of sex. It is actually transformative in many ways, and I believe that sex not only gets to be pleasurable and should be pleasurable, but it also is in many ways transformative, because the sexual is in many ways creative. The sexual, like if we're talking about, I'm pregnant right now, so this is like, it is very, very real to me right now. I'm seeing how life is created through the sexual. So we can't like separate those two, and it just models different things in life. You tap into creativity in a different way when you are in tune with all aspects of you as a whole being that God created and designed in his wisdom, in his infinite creativity and wisdom and love. And you can't be like, okay, well, let's just separate this one aspect of me, and then I'll assume and I'll pretend that I can live a fulfilling and beautiful life, especially in marriage. But also, this is for single women as well. You are sexual already, as you are right now. Even if you are not married, if you're not in a relationship, you are a sexual being. But of course, if you do have certain values and certain principles, those are beautiful and good. But creating that relationship with yourself so that there's not this baggage of shame and separation and disconnect, because they don't, like you said, they don't just magically disappear when you say I do in front of the priest. It's not like boom, it's gone, and now your life is transformed. Like the magic has happened. It doesn't happen like that. And yeah, just sorry, I went on a tangent there. I'm just so passionate about this as well, because when I see women and clients even who come to me and who are struggling with self-hatred even, and this sensation and feeling that they cannot accept or love their bodies. And sometimes I want to hear your take on this, but the women that I talk to often struggle with the idea of loving themselves, loving their bodies, and accepting their bodies, because there's this, again, conditioned, programmed belief and automatic association that if you love your body and you start, for example, looking at yourself with a mirror because you've never seen yourself down there, which is very different for a man, because they would, that would not happen with them, or
No,
touch yourself down there, again, not something that men would go through because it's anatomically just,
always touch it.
it's not a thing, right? So what would you say, like, if someone is like, I want to, but I just have this mental block that I will somehow do wrong in the sight of God if I decide that I am worthy of loving my body and even this part of my body?
Oh, I love this. Um, I love that you said like you are a sexual being before you're married. And I think like a lot of us just are like, okay, I suppress, and then once I say I do, and then I don't have to suppress anymore. But that doesn't change. Like you don't just flip the switch on and all of a sudden now you are sexual. Like you do have
Yeah.
all those hormones flowing. You do have the anatomy. Things are going to feel good, and there is that there. And so I think like we do want to, on one hand, honor what we believe to be, right. And I know everyone does have different beliefs and stuff like that. And so, you want to honor that. But you also don't want to suppress and shame your body. And so what does that balance look like? That's the big question. And again, I can't speak to everyone and everyone's beliefs, but I would honestly, I do encourage the single woman to, just like you would do your self breast exam once a month, I would encourage you to do your self vulva vaginal exam, often too.
Yeah.
And this is just because you do need to know your body. You do need to know what it feels like. You need to know what it looks like. You need to know I encourage women to grab the mirror, sit down, look at things, and speak positive affirmations as they do, because you have the choice when you put that mirror down there. Do you say like, is that what it's supposed to look like? Is that normal? I don't know. Is this supposed to smell like this? Like then you just start going down this like further shame and suppression and dissociation. So you have a choice when you put that mirror there. Or you can say like, oh, okay, that's neat. That's different. Oh, okay. And you can have a positive perspective on this. I'm never one who wants to like blow sunshine and fake positivity, but I do think a realistic positivity is so healthy and so good. So we speak positive affirmations as we do this. I teach all of my clients how to do a specific like vulvar vaginal massage kind of deal so that they can understand their body more. This isn't necessarily designed to bring pleasure. It's designed for you to connect with your body. For some it may, for some it won't. But I do encourage you to, like, as you feel, and just like you would a self breast exam, as you do your self vulva vaginal exam, you're noticing, oh, that doesn't feel good. Oh, that does feel good. Okay. Take note. You don't have to sit there and go all through the feeling good feelings. You can just know, oh, okay, there's a tingle there. Good. And then I do encourage like going in and doing some internal, like feeling how that feels, because a lot of times my clients, it's the first time they're ever feeling the inside of their vaginal canal. And that's weird. That's so weird. But it's a good thing, because then you know what that feels like. You are able to connect with that space. And you're again speaking these positive affirmations as you're doing it, and building this relationship that doesn't have to lead towards pleasure if that's something you don't want to do. You're perfectly capable of interacting with that area without doing that. And I think we don't think we can because we don't allow ourselves to see that. And so giving yourself permission to connect with your body and speaking positive affirmations about it as you do, so you build this association, this connection, this beautiful relationship of understanding And then, you know, you can transition from there if you feel comfortable bringing you pleasure into that, or having your partner present to bring pleasure into that. Like, go for it and just understand yourself more, which really is going to transition to way better intimacy. Because like you said, men are constantly looking at themselves and touching themselves. And I'm not saying like even just like with masturbation stuff, but they go to the bathroom, they have to hold themselves to go to the bathroom. They wash themselves. Like, we don't see ourselves ever. So for a lot, it's shocking when you see that down there. And you're like, even my husband, when we were going through this, he was like, wait, you don't know what you look like? It's like, how would I know? You know, it's between our legs, not in front of our legs there. So you have to connect with that. You have to connect with that space. And it's so good when we can. Yeah. In
Yes,
fact, actually, I was gonna say,
exactly. That is
a
so,
lot
so
of,
important.
I was gonna say, a lot of my clients, when we first pull the mirror out and look down there, we get a visceral response. We get a, what we call vasovagal, where we get that flush, like clammy, feeling like you're gonna vomit kind of response. Not out of disgust, but just out of, your brain doesn't have a category for looking at yourself. Your brain doesn't know that that lives there and it's on your body. And so your body kind of gives this like sweating, diaphoretic, like heartbeat, elevated, just clammy kind of response in that. And when I have a client that expresses like, Jess, I almost passed out when I pulled the mirror down there, I'm excited because I'm like, we are going to work through this. Like, this shows me that there's so much healing to do, and this is a first really beautiful step in getting ourselves to reconnect and build that relationship. And then within a matter of like a few
Mhm.
sessions and stuff, they're like, you know, so comfortable with themselves, they're loving it, and it's great. So yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So don't be afraid if something comes up. Like, if there is a reaction, if there's just, you know, emotionally or physiologically something coming up, like, don't be afraid of that. And can you just create safety around that? You know, breathe, be present. Like, you're doing this for yourself. This is a health practice. And also, I want to say, like, if you do feel pleasure, that's also not a bad thing. You don't have to hit yourself if you scratch, or if you're just like, you know, caressing yourself and you feel pleasure. Like, no one is like, oh gosh, I felt pleasure, and then now I have to hit myself and punish myself for that. So
No.
your body is capable of pleasure in so many ways, and that none of that is bad. None of that is unacceptable or awful or something like that, because it's just, for me at least, it was something that I needed to work through. And yeah, I mean, the practices that you talked about is just like creating that new, like, rewiring your system, rewiring your nervous system, and all of the ways that how your brain has mapped out your pelvic floor. And when you bring that visual to the picture, like when you bring your visual sense into it, and you can see and you can touch something that you haven't seen and touched before, yeah, there will be a reaction. But also, what you're doing is you are mapping out this area and strengthening that connection with your mind and your body, and it's just so necessary in terms of like our mindset and how we view ourselves, like from the perspective, like psychologically, like psychological aspects of this. What are some of the key tools that you can leave here before we wrap this conversation up? Some things that were the game game changing um, new ways of seeing yourself, talking about yourself, the psychological shifts that you experienced that someone can now start practicing after listening to this.
I think identifying what your main barriers are is a really big part of this. So everyone kind of has their own unique maybe barriers and mindsets that are blocking their connection with their body. So at first I'd say like do some good work, journaling, reflective work, mindset work to try and see like what are my mental blocks? What are those limitations? And so it's different for a lot of my clients and myself. Um, but I think like when it comes to our identity, that's the first thing we need to understand is what is our identity as a sexual woman? And like, how do you view that? So like I said, for me, I had to understand that like God created me to be a sexual woman and he said that that was good. And that just was so hard for me to embrace and to grasp. And so I had to work
Mm.
on that. And so that was just even like before I would do my dilator sessions, which for vaginismus, like dilators are one of the ways we work through this. But before, and they're not fun, but we make them fun. But before I do that, I would speak this affirmation, like, I was created to be a sexual woman, and I was created to enjoy intimacy, and I can and I will. And like truly believing and seeing myself capable of doing this and that this is how it was designed to be was a really huge shift for me. And then for others, it's seeing their body as beautiful and seeing their body as like a thing to be valued and cherished. And so I would just say, like, really trying to reflect on what are your limitations, because maybe you have these negative beliefs, maybe you have these like fears and the shame that's there, but that really can impact your overall enjoyment of intimacy. Not even just vaginismus, but your orgasms are going to be better if you can work through some of these thoughts and these feelings. So identify those, and then I would just like speak truth over that. And like by speaking truth, I mean speaking it out loud, sharing it with your partner so that your partner can help speak that to you, and identifying those negative thoughts and words that come in that space that try to take over and stifle that. Because once we can finally break free of these like negative thought patterns and these negative associations, we can fully embrace that pleasure. We can fully embrace, not having the pain for those who have pain with sex, but also just like increasing orgasms, increasing our desire and arousal and being present in the moment. And it's so beautiful, so beautiful. So I think we have to find those mental blocks and then speak truth into those mental blocks with confidence. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So good. So good. I could go on and on about this topic, but to honor your time, we're going to wrap this up here. And before you go, I'd love to hear first, what do you most cherish about being a woman? And secondly, where can we find you online?
It's a complicated time to ask me what I cherish about being a woman, because I'm in the it's just started my period today, and it's like, not fun. But I will say that women's bodies are amazing. Like the fact that I started my period today, and just like we do, like sometimes I look at my husband, I'm like, your body's just so like meh, just so like always the same. Like it's just you just
Yeah.
have the hormones aren't really shifting. You're not really getting all. And for me, it's like we have so many different elements of, and within a month, within a cycle, so many different elements of being able to tap into these different, let's say powers, but strengths at the time. There's also
Yeah.
weaknesses, but we have the ability to shift and capitalize on different things. And so it's kind of neat. We're kind of impressive. And then being pregnant, like, congrats on being pregnant. And that's so exciting. But just that our bodies can
Thank you.
do that. And, we're complicated, definitely being complicated as a woman, but that
Mm.
complicated isn't bad. It's something that we can embrace and really heal and grow in. So yeah, it's fun. And then where can
Yes.
people find me? So you can find me at my website, which is painfreeintimacy.com. I'm on Instagram at painfree.intimacy. I'm on TikTok, but it's not my favorite thing. And then I do have a free Facebook group, and it's like what's it called? Tips and tricks for your vaginismus recovery. And that is where I put so much free content into that Facebook group, because I know that it's hard for everyone to get access to a quality pelvic floor therapist who understands the intricacies of vaginismus. So I try to give out as many free resources as I can. There's trainings and videos and stuff in that Facebook group. But then I also do have a 12-week program that my clients and I work through, and it's amazing, and it's holistic, and it helps you kind of work through the painful sex to heal and enjoy intimacy in a beautiful, beautiful way. So
Fabulous. I'll put all the links in the show notes for you to check out if this is something that speaks to your heart and you know you need more around this topic, then you know where to go. Thank you so much, Jess. I appreciate your time tremendously. And I hope that we could connect again over a second round of this conversation to take it deeper, perhaps at some point. But for now, I'll let you go and enjoy your day. Thank you so much for being here.
thank you so much for having me. This has been such a joy, and thank you for creating space to talk about such important, important topics.